There are people who walk through life with a quiet steadiness, the kind who rarely collapse, rarely confess, and rarely let their heaviness spill into another person's hands. To the world, they look unshakable, reliable, responsible, endlessly composed, the one who listens more than they speak, the one others lean on without hesitation. But strength is not the absence of weight. Sometimes it is the constant act of carrying it, without a place to set it down. This story is about those who hold everything together, even when something inside them is unraveling. Those who never learned how to ask for help, who feel guilty for needing, and who suffer quietly in rooms where others assume they are fine. This is the documentary of their hidden loneliness and the psychology that created it. There are people in this world who look solid from the outside, not confident in a loud, declarative way, but in the quiet, dependable way that makes others feel safe simply by standing near them. They are the ones who get called first when someone is crying, when a plan falls apart, when support is needed, when something needs to be fixed. People describe them with words like mature, stable, independent, or the one that seems like praise but often feels like a sentence, strong. Strong. The word lands on their shoulders like a coat they never asked to wear, but now must carry because it has become part of who they are allowed to be. They are the person who rarely shakes, rarely breaks, rarely asks anything of anyone. In conversations, they are the listeners. They nod, understand, hold space, and say things that make others exhale in relief. People leave feeling lighter, never noticing the weight left behind. Because the strong one doesn't show weight. They rarely disclose stress or sadness. Even when they are overwhelmed, they say things like, "It's fine, I'll handle it. It's not a big deal." Even when it is. And over time, the world takes them at their word. People forget to ask how they are, not out of cruelty, but because they assume the strong one is always okay. If they were not okay, surely they would say something, right? But that assumption is the beginning of the loneliness. The strong one learns that silence is easier, tidier, less disruptive. They tell themselves that others have enough to worry about, that their emotional needs are burdensome, that needing help is a weakness they cannot afford to expose. So they become the friend who never cries in front of anyone, the partner who doesn't show fear, the sibling who doesn't ask for understanding, the colleague who stays late without complaint. Their heart becomes a locked room, lived in but never entered by others. And slowly, their identity shifts. Not from who they actually are, but who they are expected to be. Being strong becomes performance, not a conscious deception, but a learned instinct. A role played so long, the lines are memorized, the expressions automatic, the emotions rehearsed in silence. Over time, the mask fits so tightly that even they begin to forget where the mask ends and where the real self begins. Because beneath the image the world sees is someone who also gets tired, someone who also needs reassurance, care, comfort, and a place to set down the things they carry. But their loneliness is not dramatic, it is quiet, invisible. A subtle ache that shows up in small moments when they comfort someone and wish someone would comfort them back, when they give advice they wish they could follow, when they wipe someone else's tears and realize no one has seen theirs. Their exhaustion never erupts, it evaporates, little by little, day after day, until one evening they sit in a room alone, suddenly aware of a truth they have avoided. No one checks in on them, not because they are unloved, but because they have trained the world not to. People assume they don't need support because they have never seen them need it. But the strong one knows something the world does not. Strength without support eventually becomes a form of emotional self-erasure. They begin to feel like the steady wall others lean against, solid and unmoving yet unnoticed, unheld, and quietly cracking in places no one sees. This is the emotional landscape where their story begins, the moment they realize that being strong has come at a cost, that the mask has been on for so long they are no longer sure how to take it off. And beneath the mask, there is not weakness, but a deeply human need to be seen, to be understood, to be held for once. Instead of holding everything, a need that has never disappeared, only been silenced. Every strong person has a beginning, a moment or a series of moments that quietly rewrote their emotional blueprint, where the world taught them, often without saying it directly, that their feelings were secondary and responsibility was primary. Some learned it in childhood homes where emotions were chaotic. Maybe there was a parent who was fragile, unpredictable, or overwhelmed. A mother who cried often, a father who carried too much anger, a caregiver who needed support but never asked for it. Children in such homes become emotional adults too early. They learn to soothe others, to step in, to minimize problems, to become stable when the people meant to be pillars are crumbling. No one tells them you cannot have needs, but they feel it. In the tired sighs, the stressful tone of voice, the conversations that shift the spotlight away from them and onto more pressing issues. A child sees a parent in pain and decides without words, I won't add to the weight. And just like that, strength becomes their role. Other strong ones grew up in the opposite kind of home, stable, functional and structured, not traumatic, just emotionally reserved. A place where love was practical, not spoken, where vulnerability was private, not shared. In such families, the lessons sound gentle. Don't cry, be brave. You're older, you should know better. Handle it yourself. And the child learns. Emotions are handled alone. Problems are solved internally. Needing comfort is something you grow out of. Some learned their role because they were the eldest, the default helper, the extra adult, the one expected to guide the younger ones, and not fall apart in front of them. Others were the middle child, the quiet negotiator, whose emotional needs were neither urgent nor loud enough to be noticed. Some were the youngest, who learned that asking for help meant being patronized, or treated as incapable. Different stories, different environments, but all leading to a similar internal conclusion. I have to hold myself together. In many families, strength is rewarded. Children who self-regulate, who solve their own problems, who don't cause trouble, are praised as mature, responsible, independent. Adults rarely see what gets sacrificed in exchange, the child's internal right to fall apart. Then there are cultural origins. In many communities, emotional restraint is valued. Vulnerability is seen as softness. People are expected to cope behind closed doors and emerge composed. In such cultures, the language of feelings is replaced with the language of duty. You don't share sadness. You endure it. You don't tell others you're struggling. You manage it. The world admires those who carry on without complaint and quietly expects everyone to do the same. But some become especially good at it. Too good. School also teaches the lesson deeper. Teachers give more responsibility to the reliable student. Friends rely on the strong one to mediate conflict, to listen, to give advice. With every moment of being leaned on, the identity solidifies. I am the one who holds others. And once that identity forms, it rarely gets undone easily. Because here is the quiet tragedy. When a child grows into strength to survive, adulthood starts mistaking that strength for emotional invulnerability. People stop asking, are you okay? Because the answer has always been some version of, I'm fine, even when they weren't. So, by the time the strong one reaches adulthood, they have lived many years fulfilling a role they never actively chose, but now carry as though it is who they fundamentally are. They became the one others depend on, because that was how they earned love or safety or peace or belonging. And once a coping mechanism becomes tied to love or stability, the mind treats it as essential. That is where it began. Not in the dramatic moments, but in the subtle, accumulating ones, when they needed support and didn't receive it. When they expressed themselves and were overlooked. When they were praised for being so strong, instead of being comforted for being human. Over years, the emotional equation becomes clear. Needing less equals being loved more. Feeling less equals surviving more. Carrying more equals mattering more. And without realizing it, they inherited a lifetime role, the strong one, the responsible one, the one who can always handle it. A role that protected them once, but now quietly isolates them. Because what helped them survive is the same thing that now makes it hard to ask for help, even when they desperately need it. To understand the hidden loneliness of the strong ones, one must first understand a psychological pattern that often shapes them: overfunctioning. In psychology, overfunctioning describes the experience of taking responsibility for more than one's share. Emotionally, practically, relationally. Often in response to environments where support feels unreliable or unavailable. It is not a conscious decision, it is an adaptation. A nervous system that once learned, if I don't handle it, no one will. And so the mind, body, and emotional habits evolve accordingly. Hyper-independence as a defense. Many strong individuals develop what psychologists call hyper-independence, a form of emotional self-reliance shaped not from confidence, but from necessity. The brain learns that depending on others is risky, maybe help didn't come, maybe vulnerability was dismissed, Maybe asking for support led to disappointment, criticism, or ridicule. So the emotional conclusion becomes, rely on yourself. It's safer. Hyper-independence is not strength at its core. It is protection, a shield built from repeated experiences where self-containment felt like the only reliable option, the role of the nervous system. From a biological standpoint, the body responds to stress by entering one of its survival states: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Many strong ones develop a hybrid state, a calm, controlled version of fight or flight where the body remains functional, but never fully relaxes. They stay switched on, always anticipating needs, solving problems before they arise, scanning the emotional weather of the room. This is not personality. It is physiology, a body that never learned it was safe to exhale. Over time, this chronic high responsibility state changes their baseline. They operate in a kind of emotional readiness, where being at ease feels unfamiliar and being cared for feels foreign. Attachment theory and the strong one. Attachment science offers another layer of understanding. Many strong individuals develop avoidant or anxious-avoidant attachment styles, not because they lack emotion, but because asking for care once felt unproductive or unsafe. Avoidant attachment is not the absence of need. It is the absence of permission to express need. The internal logic becomes, if I don't need anyone, I can't be let down. This creates adults who love deeply, care deeply, and show up reliably, but do so without asking for emotional reciprocity. Their silence is not pride. It is self-protection learned early. Over-functioning and identity. With time, behavior becomes identity. Neuroscientists call this habitual reinforcement. The more a pattern is repeated, the more it looks like a pattern, the more automatic it becomes. A child who steps up in stressful situations becomes a teen who solves problems, becomes an adult who feels responsible for holding everything together. People around them reinforce this indirectly. You're so capable. You always know what to do. You're the reliable one. Compliments become confirmation. Responsibility becomes expected. Identity becomes fused with usefulness. And when a coping pattern becomes identity, it becomes very difficult to unlearn. Emotional suppression. Psychology also notes another consequence: emotional suppression. When feelings are consistently minimized in childhood or adolescence, the brain learns to push them down to maintain functionality. The suppressed emotions do not disappear. They store themselves in the nervous system, resurfacing later as exhaustion, numbness, irritability, loneliness, burnout, unexplained sadness, physical symptoms like headaches or tension. Because humans are not designed to be self-contained containers of stress. Even the strongest need somewhere to be soft. The silent trap of self-sufficiency. As overfunctioning continues, another psychological phenomenon appears. The strong one becomes the emotional center of gravity, and the system around them adapts. Family, partners, friends, co-workers, everyone begins leaning on them because they rarely falter. This creates a feedback loop. They give more, others expect more, they receive less. The pattern intensifies, not out of malice, but because why ask if they always manage? Over time, the strong one loses the ability to ask for help, not because they lack desire, but because the skill itself has atrophied. It feels unnatural, awkward, unfamiliar, wrong, the same way someone unused to being heard struggles to speak. Someone unused to being supported struggles to receive. The cost. On the outside, the strong one looks high-functioning, calm, capable, organized. On the inside, the emotional bill accumulates, carrying others while having nowhere to collapse, solving problems while hiding their own, being relied on endlessly without a place to be held. Overfunctioning becomes a quiet, lifelong burden, a pattern created to survive, but later difficult to escape. Because once the world sees you as unshakable, it no longer knows how to catch you when you finally start to fall. From the outside, the strong one looks calm, stable, balanced, but on the inside, there is tension. A quiet war no one ever notices. It is not the kind of conflict that screams. It is the kind that whispers, slowly wearing down the emotional architecture of a person who looks completely fine. This war has no clear villain. It is a battle between two truths. I wish someone would help me, and I don't know how to let them. A contradiction that lives in the same heart, pulling in opposite directions. The desire to be held. Even the strongest want comfort. They want someone to recognize the weight they carry, without being told. They want a moment where they don't have to be the reliable one, the problem solver, the steady presence. They want to be the one who collapses for once and still remains loved. But here is the quiet tragedy. Even when someone offers support, even when love is present, even when care is available, the strong one instinctively pushes it away. Not because they do not want it, but because receiving feels unfamiliar and frightening. The fear beneath the surface. Psychologically, strong individuals often carry a core fear. If I show how much I am struggling, people will see me differently. Strength has become their language. Vulnerability feels like speaking in sounds they never learned to pronounce. They worry that collapsing will disappoint others, burden someone else, make them seem weak, change how people rely on them, expose pain they don't know how to explain. So their heart stays armored. Even when a part of them longs to set the armor down, the guilt of needing. Another internal enemy appears, guilt. When the strong one feels overwhelmed, they often judge themselves more harshly than others ever would. They think, I should be able to handle this. Other people have it worse. I don't deserve support. It's selfish to ask. This guilt doesn't come from arrogance, but from years of equating worth with usefulness. If love was earned through holding things together, then needing becomes synonymous with failing. So instead of reaching out, they stay silent. They soothe themselves privately. They cry where no one sees. They swallow their struggles before they ever reach their lips. And afterward, they feel what many strong ones know too well. The loneliness that follows self-silencing. The exhaustion that never speaks. There is a specific kind of tiredness that belongs only to those who are always the strong one. Not the tiredness of physical work or a long day or lack of rest, but the exhaustion of always being the one who understands, always being the one who adjusts, always being the one who remains composed, always being the one others lean on. An invisible fatigue that builds slowly, layer by layer, the exhaustion of feeling emotionally full, with nowhere to empty. Sometimes it shows up as numbness, sometimes as irritability, sometimes as the quiet thought, I can't keep doing this. And yet the next morning, they wake up and continue, because that is what they have always done. The resentment they are afraid to admit. Inside the strong one is another feeling. They rarely allow themselves to feel resentment, not because they don't love the people around them, but because they wish someone would notice without being told. They lie awake sometimes and think, why can I see everyone so clearly, but no one seems to see me? Yet even their resentment turns inward. It's my fault. I'm the one who told them I was fine. And the cycle continues, the mask that feels like skin. After years of holding themselves together, the strong one reaches a strange paradox. They want help, yet are terrified of being helpless. They want to be seen, yet are terrified of being perceived as needy. They want closeness, yet are terrified of depending on others. Internal wars like these are silent. There are no arguments, no screams, no external breakdowns, just a heart split between longing and fear. Support feels dangerous, aloneness feels unbearable, and somewhere in the middle, their emotional voice goes quiet. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they no longer know how to say it. This is the hidden battlefield, the quiet psychological tension between the need for connection and the instinct to protect oneself from needing anything at all. A war fought silently. In people the world calls strong, there always comes a moment, quiet, private, and painfully human, when the soul can no longer carry what the mouth refuses to speak. For people who have spent years being the strong one, the breaking point is rarely loud. It's not a dramatic collapse, not screaming, not a movie scene meltdown. It's something much smaller, a single moment in an ordinary day, when the body whispers what the heart can no longer hide. Maybe it happens when they sit on the edge of the bed and stare at the floor, longer than they usually do, when they drive home and don't remember half the road, because their mind was somewhere else entirely, when someone asks, "Are you okay?" and they almost say no. But the words freeze behind the teeth like prisoners. Or maybe it happens in a moment no one notices, a tremble in the hands, a sigh too heavy for the chest that released it, a sentence they can't finish because the world suddenly feels too loud, a single tear that falls before they have the strength to wipe it away. What breaks them is not one big catastrophe, but the accumulation of small hurts. They never allowed themselves to feel. Every time they said, "I'm fine, I'll handle it. It's not a big deal. I don't want to trouble anyone." The weight on their shoulders grew. The breaking point is the moment their body finally rebels. Psychologists call this collapse of coping, when the survival system that carried them for years simply runs out of fuel. They may feel suddenly exhausted for no clear reason, emotionally numb or incredibly sensitive, unable to function at their usual high level, irritated by simple things, confused by why little things now feel heavy, strangely close to tears over things that never used to matter. Because the body always keeps the score. It remembers every swallowed emotion, every unmet need, every night they pretended sleep was rest. And when the body finally decides enough, it does not ask for permission. This moment can be terrifying. People who have always been the caretaker don't know what to do. When their own inner scaffolding starts to shake, there is shame at first. Why am I falling apart now? Other people go through worse. I should be stronger than this. But slowly, in the middle of this collapse, something else begins to surface. A realization so simple, yet so revolutionary for someone who spent years suppressing it. I am human. Not a machine, not a miracle, not an unbreakable wall of strength. Human. And humans have limits. At this breaking point, they finally see that strength was never meant to mean carrying everything alone. They may not know how to ask for help yet. They may not even know what they need. But they do know this. Something has to change. Because continuing like this is no longer survival, it's self-destruction. And that quiet awareness at the first crack in the armor is the beginning of transformation. The breaking point is not failure. It is the body saying, with a voice that can no longer be ignored, you deserve to be held too. Healing, for people who have spent their lives holding themselves together, rarely begins with a dramatic leap. It starts with something far smaller, a single moment of allowing someone else to stay, when the instinct is to pull away. Because for the over-functioning, self-contained soul, letting others help is not natural. It is a skill they were never taught. They must learn support, the same way some children learn to walk, slowly, shakily, and with many pauses. The first step, unlearning the old rules. They were raised or conditioned to believe, needing help makes you weak. People leave if you depend on them. You must earn safety. Your worth is measured by how much you do. These rules became their emotional operating system, and healing requires rewriting them. Therapists call this reparenting the self, giving the inner child what the real world never provided: permission to feel, permission to ask, permission to rest, permission to not always be strong. This is not easy. Even when support is offered with love, they may feel a tightening in the chest, a voice whispering, "Don't become a burden." Healing begins with gently responding. It is not a burden to have needs. The second step, feeling before fixing. People who grew up in emotional survival learn to fix problems instead of feel them. So learning support means learning to sit with emotions. Instead of outrunning them, it means allowing tears. Instead of swallowing them, it means saying, "I'm overwhelmed, I'm tired, I don't know what to do," and letting those words exist without rushing to justify, explain, or minimize. For the first time, their pain is seen, and that alone is healing. The third step, letting others in. This is where transformation truly begins. Not everyone is safe. Not everyone deserves access, but someone, a partner, a trusted friend, a therapist, a mentor, becomes a place where their pain does not have to be silent. It might look like sitting on a couch and finally talking, sending a late-night message that says, "I'm not okay," saying, "I need help," even if their voice shakes, allowing someone to stand beside them instead of ahead of them. And in that moment, they experience something foreign yet life-changing. They don't crumble by sharing. They don't lose respect. They are not abandoned. They are met. Psychologists call this corrective emotional experience -- a moment where the nervous system learns a new truth. I can be supported and still be safe. The fourth step, learning interdependence. Independent people think the goal is dependence or independence. The truth is neither. Humans are meant for interdependence, a balance where you can stand on your own, but don't have to stand alone. You can be strong and still need others. You can give love and also receive it. For someone who has never had that balance, this shift is profound. They realize strength grows in connection, not isolation. The fifth step, rebuilding the relationship with the self. As external support increases, internal support does too. They begin to speak to themselves kindly. You're doing your best. It's okay to rest. Your needs matter. You don't have to earn love. This is where real integration happens. They are no longer surviving the world. They are living in it. Healing is not linear. There will be moments when they fall back into old patterns, saying, "I'm fine," automatically, taking on too much, feeling guilty for asking, wanting to run from closeness. But progress is measured not by perfection, but by awareness. Each time they choose openness over withdrawal, softness over self-punishment, expression over silence they rewire the nervous system, one gentle inch at a time. And slowly, something beautiful happens. They begin to trust that not everyone leaves, not everyone disappoints, not everyone needs them to be invincible. They begin to realize that allowing someone to hold a part of the weight does not make them less. It makes them human. And in learning to be supported again, they discover a truth that was waiting for them all along. The strongest people are not the ones who carry everything alone, but the ones who dare to be held. Hope does not arrive loudly for people who have spent a lifetime holding everything together. It does not burst through the door with celebration or fireworks. It doesn't shout, "Everything is fixed now." Instead, it slips in quietly, soft as breath, gentle as the sound of fabric shifting on a chair small enough that it could almost be missed. It begins with a moment so subtle that no one else would notice. A deep exhale they didn't know they were holding. A night where the body finally sleeps instead of bracing. A conversation that feels safe instead of performative. A tear that falls without apology. This is what hope looks like for those who learn to live in emotional armor. Hope in the smallest things. For people who spent their lives being the strong one, hope is not a transformation. It is a collection of tiny acknowledgements. I didn't collapse when I opened up. Someone stayed. I'm starting to believe I matter too. Maybe I don't have to hold the world alone. These small truths become seeds planted in soil that once knew only survival. They do not bloom overnight. They grow slowly, like morning light inching across the floor, before the sun fully rises, but they grow. A life no longer done alone. There comes a moment, unexpected and quiet, when they realize that they are no longer carrying everything by themselves, not because the weight disappeared, but because they finally allowed the world to share it. This is not a loss of strength. It is the evolution of it. Real strength is no longer the silence that holds everything inside, but the courage to let someone witness what the silence was containing. A nervous system learning safety. Hope is also physical. The trembling in the chest softens. The shoulders drop an inch. The body stops scanning every room for emotional exits. The nervous system, once wired for emergency begins to learn peace. Not permanent peace, but moments of it. Enough to prove that safety is possible. Enough to make the next step less terrifying. Enough to make healing feel real, not theoretical. Nothing grand, but everything different. Their life may look the same from the outside. They still show up, still love deeply, still take care of others. But now, they are not invisible to themselves. They are not disappearing in the process. They are not only the caretaker, provider, listener, problem solver. They are also a person with a heart that needs holding, a soul that deserves softness, a human who was never meant to carry the world alone. The miracle of being seen. Hope crystallizes in a single realization: I am allowed to need. 4 words. Soft, unremarkable, world-changing. Because for the strong ones, those words rewrite a lifetime of beliefs. They turn childhood lessons into outdated scripts. They turn loneliness into possibility. They turn survival into living. A new kind of strength. They no longer want to be the hero, the one who never falls, never cracks, never needs. They want to be human. They want a life that includes mutual support, shared vulnerability, balanced effort, love that does not demand self-erasure. And for the first time that they are willing to believe such a life is possible. Nothing ends here. This is not the kind of story where everything is magically healed. People who carried their worlds alone for years do not shed that conditioning overnight. There will still be days of silence, and there will still be moments of closing up. There will still be times when asking feels impossible. But now, there is awareness. Now, there is choice. Now, there is a door where there used to be a wall, and even if that door opens just a few inches at a time, it is enough. A quiet promise. Hope, in the end, is not a loud victory. It is a whisper. There is another way to live, and I am beginning to learn it. It is a slow unfolding, like hands unclenching after years of gripping too tightly. It is the understanding that strength and softness were never enemies. It is the realization that being held does not make a person smaller. It allows them to finally breathe. And somewhere deep inside, where exhaustion once lived, a new belief begins to settle. I am not alone anymore. Because in their body, a reflex still fires. Be strong. Don't open up. Don't bother anyone. Years of conditioning do not vanish with insight. The nervous system must be shown, not told, that safety is possible. So healing happens through experience. Someone expresses a small vulnerability and no one turns away. They admit they are tired and someone listens without rushing to fix. They allow someone to see a crack in the armor, and that person does not judge, punish, or disappear. In that moment, a new internal note is written. Maybe it's not dangerous to be human. Psychologists call this corrective emotional experience, the process of replacing old relational memories with new, healthier ones. It is not about dramatic breakthroughs. It is about tiny moments that contradict history, where they once reached out and were met with silence, now they are met with presence. Where they once were shamed for struggling, now they are allowed to struggle without losing dignity. Where they once expected rejection, they encounter acceptance. Each moment rewires something. Each safe interaction strengthens a new pathway. Distress arrow, connection, arrow, relief. A sequence that once failed now becomes believable again. But healing is not linear. Some days, vulnerability feels possible. Other days, the body retreats back behind its walls. They share a piece of their truth, and the next day feel exposed, overthinking every word, wondering if they revealed too much. This is normal. Growth often feels like forward motion followed by panic. The nervous system is doing something unfamiliar. And unfamiliar, even when good, can feel dangerous. So part of healing is learning to sit with discomfort. To resist the urge to retreat completely, to stay open just a little longer each time. Support does not become comfortable overnight. Trust rebuilds slowly. Another important part of healing is understanding that asking for help does not mean abandoning independence. For someone accustomed to self-reliance, fear often whispers, if you lean, you won't stand on your own anymore. But this is a misunderstanding. Support is not replacement, it is reinforcement. A healthy nervous system is not one that never needs others. It is one that can regulate both alone and together. In therapy, this is called dual regulation, the ability to calm oneself internally, but also receive soothing from external connection when overwhelmed. Many who grew up without consistent emotional support only develop the first half. Healing completes the other. And then there comes a quieter revelation. Being helped does not make them weak, it makes them human. Because human beings are not meant to carry everything alone. The body was designed to settle in the presence of another calm nervous system. Pain was meant to be witnessed. Stress was meant to be shared. Even evolution recognizes this. Social mammals survive through cooperation, not isolation. When they begin to internalize this truth, something shifts. Support stops feeling like failure and starts feeling like relief. Eventually, they learn to express their needs more openly, not dramatically, not constantly, but honestly. They discover that asking does not cost their dignity, that needing help does not erase their strength, that letting someone in does not take away control. It simply lightens the load. This is what healing looks like. Not becoming dependent, but becoming free. Free from the reflex of silence, free from the shame of needing, free from the belief that they must survive alone. In that freedom, they begin living. Not just enduring. Healing does not arrive like lightning. It seldom comes in a single breakthrough, a single confession, a single moment of falling apart. It comes quietly, sometimes so quietly, you don't even notice that it has begun. Maybe the first sign of hope isn't joy or relief or strength. Maybe it is simply this: you no longer believe. You have to carry everything alone. For someone who has spent years being their own shelter, this is not small, it is monumental. Hope isn't loud, it's patient. People assume hope is loud, that it shines brightly, glows obviously, or announces its arrival. But hope for those who have lived in silence is often subtle. It looks like answering honestly when someone asks, "Are you okay?" Saying, "I need a moment," instead of pushing through. Allowing yourself to cry without apologizing for it. Letting someone stay beside you without feeling like you're a burden. Recognizing that you matter even when your pain is not dramatic or visible. Small acts, but brave ones. Hope begins with permission. You give yourself permission to feel, to need, to want, to rest, to be human again. The mind that once believed, "No one will be there for me," slowly unlearns it. Not because the world suddenly changes, but because you learn to allow the possibility. that life can hold more than the past allowed. You start building a new truth. Sometimes people do care. Sometimes help does arrive. Sometimes I don't have to be strong alone. And each time you trust this new truth, it grows, a life after silence. There will still be days when you revert, when the old instinct returns. Stay quiet, don't ask, handle it alone. That is okay. Healing is not the end of struggle. It is the beginning of awareness. What changes now is not that the pain disappears, but that you no longer face it without tools or choices or connection. You know there are hands you can reach for, even if you don't always reach. The beautiful return to yourself. One day, maybe unexpectedly, you look back and notice you didn't collapse under the weight. You changed how you carried it. You softened. You opened. You learned that vulnerability is not weakness. It is the courage to stay in life, with your heart still beating in the open. You became someone who understands both sides, how hard suffering in silence can be and how gentle it feels when suffering is shared. This is how life becomes livable again. Hope is choosing to try again. Hope is not the end of the story. It is an invitation to ask again, to trust again, to keep walking, to keep feeling, to keep letting life in even when it has hurt before. Small, quiet, courageous, the kind of hope that doesn't shout from the mountaintop but whispers softly in the heart. You are allowed to be held too. And with that, the story of the silent one becomes something new, not about surviving alone, but about learning, finally, that they never had to. The world may not hear this transformation, but the soul does, and that is enough.